want to say?
We could just take that and say, wow, current node.
So, right. So while there's something there,
It's just like a function.
and again, if it's null, it's false, and if it's anything else, it's true. So while there's something there is how I say it, right? While there's the next thing, do this stuff. Not, again, we're sort of in the weird double negative period. While the next thing is not some, not an empty something, go on, and then my brain already freezes up there. So again, some people like to kind of have the two sides of it. It's like this is equal to this, or this is not equal to this, and it's hard to break that habit. But try reading out loud. While the current node next is not equal to null pointer. Okay, that's one way. Or while current node next. While there's something in next. So once you sort of start to work this way, it reads a ton easier, I think. And especially when you're doing a not equals instead of a equal equals, it's even harder to read this kind of case over here. Anything else?
I guess this is more of a question. Do we even need the while current node next? Couldn't we just say while current node?
So that's sort of because of this last case kind of thing here. And there are different, this is always a weird thing when there's like something at the beginning or end you want to do a little bit differently, and it's sort of annoying writing loops like that. And so like another way would have been to print out the first thing and then print out a space and this thing, and then at the end just print out a period, And I sort of actually looked at that a little bit and then decided I still like this a little better maybe. But these loops that have like one special thing are always a little bit different than just writing loops. Add one to every element. You can write that so easily. If it was add one and then add 5 to the last one, all of a sudden it kind of throws you for a loop, and then you start doing weird stuff. So I would just encourage you to kind of get this kind of special case thing under control. And I think there's 3 or 4 different ways of doing it like this that are all relatively the same in terms of readability, and whether you do the special thing at the beginning or at the end, or anyway, there's different ways. But anything else you can think of?
Yeah. Can we just store the current node next into a variable and then use that variable wherever it gets called?
So you want to, when you make this thing, you also want to make the next one. It's called next node,
Just
and
store it in a variable before the while loop, and then we can use that variable.
I think you'll sort of end up updating. Well, yeah, maybe, I don't know. I see what you're saying a little bit. Always be looking one forward kind of with it, right? And see how that looks. So this would be, that way you'd lose the first case. You have to do the first case special because you already moved one forward. I have to see what that ends up, but maybe that's sort of an interesting idea. Yeah. But I urge you to prepare something like this with, again, this. And it's not just number of lines of code. It's number of indent layers you've got going on here, right? Each one of which requires you to track, well, this code belongs to this, and this code belongs to this, but not to, this kind of stuff. And then sort of some other things that sort of add noise to the code, comments that don't add any information, variables that really don't help you understand what's going on. If I had asked you, without saying the top, print value of the space between and period at the end, what this does, you probably have to spend a couple of minutes looking at it, and then one, convincing yourself that it actually did what you thought it was supposed to do, and then was it actually correct or not, and then 2, sort of what exactly is it trying to accomplish here? Where I think something like, like this, you can kind of go, okay, start at the beginning, you stop one before the end, you print out some stuff, and then there's a special case at the end that prints out the, but you can kind of move through that pretty quickly. And I think somehow it's like writing papers. It's easy to write kind of messy essay that doesn't really follow some strong argument, and you add all sorts of extraneous information, and you sort of have half thoughts that they go on, and then they die to paragraph and go again. and take some practice, write your papers, to look at that paper, be objective enough in your own. You created this, and at some point your brain is saying this is okay. To go back and say, okay, I need to do some revision, right? And the same kind of thing here. You need, as you write code, you need to be thinking like, okay, I was really writing some funny stuff here. I think this is going to work, but you should be suspicious of it and make sure you're evaluating your own code as you go, and just think about it a little bit more. And again, sometimes it's nice about having a partner, pair programming, or a group to review this stuff, and they can kind of say, hey, look, I know this looks okay to you, but there's a lot of things here that you can change. And anyway, I think that's a very important skill, and we all need practice in it, basically. And so I'd encourage you to keep working on these kind of issues. But just get on that mindset. So tomorrow's lab is a worksheet with two sides. One side is kind of meeting with the TA about progress. So how are things going? We're halfway through sort of the time for implementation here. At some point you had a Gantt chart that said when things were going to happen. Are you at all along the Gantt chart? Any giant team kind of issues that need immediate intervention, kinds of things. And then the other side's doing code review. So hopefully there's been something written at this point, even if it's like an experimental piece of code, not like part of the official project, but someone trying something out. So pick something that'd be nice if the team's all clear on how it works, right? So one goal of these code reviews is to make sure your team knows about important core technologies in the project and to discuss how they work. So maybe, for example, if you have like a frames kind of class, hey, that sounds like something that you use in a lot of different places, right? So maybe talk about that. So just go through the code, whoever maybe the main programmer can describe it, people can ask questions, and then you're supposed to have your code style guidelines, and you should see if they make sense in the context of that one piece of code. Like, we need to fix anything, a guideline's complete enough. Use that as a chance to kind of do a little dry run on these code style guidelines. That again are mostly just formatting issues. How you name things, how you space things out. Nothing too, actually technical. Just how it looks. Okay, questions on that? Next class, Thursday, and a class. I just want to see, we just want to let people see what's going on. So again, we're going to have this little alpha release. Anything you got running that seems to be related to the project, that's, just put it on a laptop and let people come up and poke at it. See if they understand a lot of what's going on. And you get a chance to go around to other projects and kind of see calibrate a little bit as to what's going on with other projects. Again, this is not like some teams I think feel very protective of their killer feature and they want to keep it a secret to the big reveal or something like that. And that's fine. But I think I'd also encourage you to show it off and let people know what you're working on, that you're proud of, and to see what's going on. So this is just sort of a sharing and caring kind of thing a little bit. No big thing. But do try to get something you think of. Like, don't make some big change on your GitHub where at the last second or before Thursday, then have nothing running or something like that. So try to get something that you can bring up and run. And it's going to be crowded people around various laptops looking at stuff, and just whatever works out is fine. Don't sweat it. All right, so this is a waterfall type project. It's supposed to be planning, picking features, deciding the pace of how things get implemented. How's that going so far? Have you matched anything you promised? Any problems with it? Does it help move the project along? Any thoughts? Any thoughts? So, there are a lot of waterfall projects, 80s and 90s, that were late and over budget. You don't have that option. You can't just be sorry, we're going to run a year late on this project.
What's weird to me is there's sometimes a specific feature that a certain person's working on, and then nobody else can really do their job until that feature is done. In the industry, I'm kind of curious how how that was like.
So you get sort of some core class that's this bottleneck when it's not done, right?
Yeah, that kind of seems what happens.
Well, you either devote more people to that core stuff, or people sit around and all kind of stuff.
I don't like waterfall.
What do you like?
I like the more like Agile development where you can on the fly say, okay, this was way less important than we thought, or we can completely just scrap this and this is now important. You can kind of it's much more interchangeable. Like
Yeah, right. There are other processes that are supposed to be more flexible and dynamic and adaptable. That doesn't mean you get to skip out on all the hard stuff, right? Like, this is terrible. Let's just work on something instead. Yeah.
I think Agile is just like very, very a bunch of tiny waterfalls.
Yeah.
Where like there's like a little bit of it, but it's not like the entire problem.
So we're going to talk about Agile and then like Scrum and some other ones like starting now. So we'll see how that compares a little bit. But so for the most part, the problem is this project does not enforce the little internal deadlines you might have said well enough for you to feel the heat of not meeting those deadlines. So it's a little hard to say exactly, how it's working on a larger scale. But hopefully you're running into a little bit of discomfort with, like problems in certain features, and sort of now the more you're thinking about it, you're just not like, I don't care about that, or that seems like a really hard thing to do, or something that you want to sort of be able to adapt to a little more easily. Any cutesy things to discuss? So I'll say one thing. There was a nice question on Piazza saying, hey, we're trying to hold down the mouse and draw, and we get like a pixel filled here, and then a one here, and then it skips and fills in here. So there's like gaps, right? Has anyone seen this in any little test you've done? Where it's just not drawing fast enough, kind of thing? So I'd say there are a variety of things you can do, and I'm not sure what the killer answer is. One of the worst things you can do is say cout X pause, Y pause in your sort of mouse tracking loop, because that looks pretty innocuous and you just don't hit the console. How bad is that? It actually causes like a big system interrupt to get information out to the console, and really takes off, takes a big chunk of time basically. So if you're trying to move around here, it's printing out 100, 200, 101, 201, something like that, that's really likely killing into your frame rate, essentially. So if you want to say use those for debugging, and then comment them out, get rid of them eventually, so you can see if it's performing okay. You can try compiling more optimized. So there's these optimization flags for C++ compilers, O2, O3, OFast, and you can see if one of those just makes things magically go faster. And it's easy enough to just Google, how do I add compiler flags to a QMake project, and it'll tell you there's a thing you can put in your profile. So try that. I was reading some stuff. Qt does something called like event compression. Maybe they're throwing out some events or something like that. And there's some ways that looks a little tricky to tell it not to do event compression. But I think fundamentally it should be able to handle you dragging your mouse and filling in some big squares as it goes. That's not the highest performance thing one can imagine doing. Another thing you might notice is that a lot of programs that allow you to just sort of freeform draw actually cheat. And if it gets, this is spot 1, this is spot 2, this is spot 3, it actually draws a little line between 2 and 3 and kind of fills in those gaps for you. So if you're moving really fast, it's hard for anything to keep up really, and it will actually draw. You can start seeing like a little bit of sharp angles as it connects together these little polyline things. So if you are having some issues, you might find it easy to fill in those gaps by drawing. Thinking of this as connecting the dots and you get a smoother line like that. And it's never going to be quite that jaggedy. It's going to be, it'll look smooth unless you look really close. So I think it's just kind of disappointing if you're trying to drag around and fill in dots and it's just like jumping like crazy. And it just kind of you can handle that. You can conquer that. So think about that a little bit. And feel free to look on Piazza and add some stuff if you try anything that works or you find something else. It's nice to have a general discussion about these issues. Anything else? I posted under the implementation assignment a sample SSP file, 4x4 image, a little red-green dot that has 2 frames, nothing very exciting. I wrote it by hand, and I could have screwed it up. So if you have a JSON library and it fails on it, maybe blame me first and talk to me, and I'll try to fix it up. All right, so someone that's already working on the JSON loading, give that a try. I'll try to, I did try that too, but I wrote it before class, so I didn't have time to try that. And anyway, see if you can get that to work. Anything else about the assignment? So probably Thursday I'll have a sign-up sheet for the Wednesday lab when you're going to present, and so look for that. We'll talk about that as well. All right. Agile. So again, there's discontent about these sort of very formal documentation-heavy methods. And in 2001, here in Snowbird, Utah, a bunch of non-skiers got together and talked about sort of these lightweight processes. And they outlined some core values and wrote inside what's called the Agile Manifesto. So they kind of, they're in a revolutionary mindset. The manifesto is available online. And it has a certain founding father, religious, rebirth kind of feel to it a little bit, right? Like, there's this picture from this conference, and they painterly background on it, and they sign it like the Declaration of Independence kind of thing. And a lot of versions of it. So anyway, there's a certain cultish fervor people ascribe to Agile people a little bit, that people get way into the terminology and things like that. And so I should be aware of it a little bit. And in fact, you can read this link to the Agile Manifesto, and then I could have picked a million different versions of this, but there was some discussion somewhere, some guy saying, man, I hate Agile. And people saying, like, no, I don't hate it. And I'm like, no, I hate you too. And so like most internet discussions. But there's some thoughts that are expressed there that at least kind of highlight some things about Agile that some people don't like. So anyway, we can look at that and do the news stories. Okay, Gilbert, we're going to try something called Agile programming. That means no more planning, no more documentation, just start writing code and complaining. I'm glad it has a name. And that was your training, basically. Actually, a lot of training for a lot of Agile stuff, so that seems wrong. But one managerial view of Agile is that you lack these important things that define how the project is going to be done. Of course, that's not, that is a comic view of this, but it is a certain idea. All right, so the manifesto, we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. So they're kind of saying that it's practitioners that know how to write software, not management, not sort of academics, but people that are actually writing software. And through this, we've come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So again, don't be trapped by your process, don't be trapped by your documentation. Working software over comprehensive documentation. So again, the outcome of software engineering should be software that works, not a bunch of documents that claim something and then having software that doesn't work. Kind of as a counterpoint to that, actually I was reading someone discussing let's see, what are they discussing? Mac OS X's API. And they're saying, man, they have a lot of cool stuff here, but I can't figure out how it even works. The documentation is terrible, right? And in fact, I was trying to decide whether to do something using Spotify's API or Apple Music API. I spent 5 minutes with each, and they said, okay, the Spotify stuff looks a ton easier to use, and so I'm gonna do that. So all I'm trying to say there is, again, working software is great, but if you're trying to provide something that other people are going to use, documentation has a role. Customer collaboration or contract negotiation. So again, especially a lot of Agile methods, there's the idea that your client is going to be heavily involved in the process and give you guidance many steps along the way. So rather than sort of a one-time contract negotiation where you lock everything down, it's more like you come to an agreement that you're going to work together until you get a satisfactory piece of software. Responding to change over following plan. So things change and does seem done to have to stick to the plan because you negotiated with it. They're not saying the things on the right are useless. They're just saying the things on the left are what Agile processes are trying to encourage. And so in contrast, the things on the right are things that the management tends to value because it's very quantifiable and contractual and things like that. And so there's a sort of this clash between developers and management over which of these processes is better. So in these values, individuals and interactions, what does that mean? So you want strong players. So they want you to be a competent programmer, basically. But in some ways, working as a team is more important than raw talent. And it's kind of hard because certainly in classes we value, those of you that are getting 100% on assignments and 98 on tests, and that's a measure of being awesome. And then we're sort of saying that, well, businesses, well, we want you to be, well-versed and competent. It's this team stuff that's important, and it's sort of hard. I think it's actually hard to portray really how important that is for many organizations, that you are someone who can work in a group and communicate what you're doing, not get into big, fights all the time about the right way to do things. And so, anyway, I bring that up as a sort of counterpoint to what we beat you all the time, which is, our grader says you're a 95, kind of thing. And we sort of claim the soft skill stuff is important, but it really is important for a lot of organizations. Right, tools are important, but they're wary of management buying some big fancy tool and then forcing everyone to use it when they don't really want to use it, and just adding more friction to the development process. So really, it's how people work together that's the important thing, and not following along some larger process. Working software or comprehensive documentation. You're saying too much documentation is worse than too little. So being forced to write tons and tons of stuff, documenting code, it takes time to write it. It takes time to keep it synchronized with your changing code. So now you're less agile because you have this huge document base, and maybe you're reluctant to change things because all of a sudden you got to make your UML diagrams again. You got to make this stuff. You got to make this stuff. And so there, some short documents, giving some stuff is helpful, but don't add too much. Some people like documentation for the ability to bring on board new team members, and they say just work with them, be an individual, and work with them until they're up to speed, and then they're part of the team. So this whole customer collaboration, again, the idea is that you can't just plan everything in advance and say this is $1 million project. It's more like we're going to work together, and customers have to give feedback as to how things are going. Also, the goals change over long projects, and maybe you need to react to market forces and change stuff, and you don't want to be locked into a contract. And for planning, a lot of Agile processes basically say, okay, here's what we're doing the next few weeks or next week. The sort of length of time of Agile gets shorter and shorter, it seems like. And then you hopefully have some rough idea what's going on in the next few months, and maybe some vague plan for the future, but you're not writing some 8-page document that says, here's what we're doing for the next year. All right. And to be honest, a lot of this stuff is pretty common sense, and it seems pretty important to saying common sense things, but I guess someone had to say it. So there's a lot of principles, again, it's like values and principles and all these things associated with it. So our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. So notice we're saying it's software that's valuable, right? Not that we're going through phase 1 or phase 2. It's that we are producing software that works for some set of features. There have been reviews saying, there's a strong correlation between sort of overall project quality and early prototypes and frequent deliveries, so chances to iterate and see how things are going. And Agile has a similar goal. Iterate a lot, produce something, and then let the customer decide, whether they like that iteration or want to change it. So unlike waterfall, where you lock into requirements, Agile welcomes changing requirements. So basically saying that is a way to provide a competitive advantage. Some new technology comes out, we want to incorporate that. That makes us a better product than whatever else is going to be out there. An outcome of this is that you need to keep your software structure flexible. So it needs to be well architected, high quality code, so you can change it without breaking everything. They deliver working software early and often. They don't just deliver plans. Those don't count as any kind of deliverable, basically. It might be part of the process, but you don't go to say, this is something we've done in the last few weeks. And this is, I don't know, this is common in almost any kind of long-term project. I mean, when I was a graduate student, I'd meet with my advisor once a week kind of thing, and I always dreaded she'd tell me, every time she'd say, tell me something exciting you've done last week, And she didn't mean going out and hiking or anything like that. She meant, some exciting software development. And I would try to say, well, I have some plans to do this, and I wrote a document about this, and try to pretend I was achieving something. But I wasn't. I wasn't producing any working early and often software. I was just producing some ideas, right? And it's a very different thing than, so it's very different to sort of be saying, well, I'm planning on doing this, or I'm, I was trying to do this, I was hoping to do this, versus here's some code that runs and does something. So that's, I think, an important distinction. They kind of nail it here. That, okay, if you're writing code, you got to show off your code that you're writing to be counted and making progress. Otherwise, you're just kind of pretending and probably surfing the web, which happens. They want the developers to be working together frequently with either the client or the business side, make sure everyone involved in the project is basically satisfied with the direction. So again, you can't just disappear for 3 months and work on stuff and say, today I have a project, and the business people are like, well, where's the save button on this thing, or something like that, right? So a lot of feedback. So the idea is how projects get done is through motivating individuals to work as a team to get a project done. And there's a lot of trust involved in this. Let's see if this is where I want to say one thing. Oh, anyway, all right, so it's a little bit of a hands-off management approach where you're not supposed to be checking in and micromanaging everybody. It's more like the team's going to figure out how to get this done, and all our job as management is to provide an environment where that's possible for success to happen. They like face-to-face communication. So this is a bit rare. Again, there's a goal in some processes to write about documentation. You use that as sort of primary communication mechanism. And they really want people to sit down next to each other, look at code, talk about it, and develop plans that way. So while there might be other mechanisms that are needed for some longer term stuff, the default is you just get together as a group, as pairs, and discuss things. Okay, working software to measure progress, that's some sort of the same as delivering early software often, but again, you don't measure it by phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, you measure it by how much of the project is actually working at this point in time. Pretty easy. I think it's interesting that they recognize that software development is a difficult process, and teams are an important important resource for a company. And one goal of the company should be to maintain those teams in a way that they can work effectively for long periods of time. So agile teams don't let themselves get too tired. They don't, try to stay all weekend trying to get some short-term goal done, and they want to work in a way that lets them keep high quality. You're not rushing your code out, and so on. And again, this is, well, probably from a management point of view, this is a dangerous part of the manifesto. Certainly some areas of software development are notorious for sort of burnout and fast-paced work. Anyone have any in mind? Like the video game industry, partly because of their schedule, right? They got to get stuff out like now for the holiday shopping season, and a lot of teams are actually sort of put together sort of per project, and so there's not a lot of investment in the team. You get a group of people and artists and so on, and they sort of form for just one project and then kind of reform for another project. Startups are another one where sort of there's the idea that you're supposed to be, you're going to just burn 2 years of your life just kind of working on code and then decide if you're going to be rich at the end or not, and that's kind of a trade-off for something. But there are a lot of agile software development groups out there now that really pay a lot of attention to quality of life, life-work balance, and so on. And that's because, one, they know it's hard to hire good developers, and they want to keep you around, and two, they just think it's better long-term for quality to do so. And so when you're looking at jobs, I think these are reasonable. Again, your first question probably should not be like, can I go home at 3 or something like that, or, but you can ask people what a day looks like or how they deal with vacation time and stuff. And anyway, there are some companies that really believe in this and are trying to push it, and some that want to squeeze you for all your work, and you can decide which, what's important to you, but you should at least be aware of some of those issues. One thing I'm a little suspicious of these days is the unlimited vacation time. This whole deal?
Oh, yeah.
Does that sound good, right?
Yeah.
Sounds good, right? But the problem is, it's like if you have 3 weeks vacation, it's like a accountable resource that you sort of are intended to use up at some point. This unlimited vacation time is just more like, well, when things quiet down, you can take some vacation, but the chances of things quieting down are maybe limited. So, but actually, I think there are some companies that are really good about like, okay, you got to go to the doctor, just take off, don't worry about it. So it's hard to, just from the word, it's hard to know how that comes out, right? Whether it's a good thing for you or whether they're just trying to trick you into never taking any vacation whatsoever. So Agile doesn't think that just because you're trying to write stuff sort of with quick iterations that you should write sloppy code. In fact, they say the opposite, that by writing high quality code that allows you to work quickly as a team, right? You're not fixing a bunch of dumb mistakes all over the place, and you're allowed to, you can make changes more easily because the code is basically better architected and more understandable. So this is not this is not a thing that says, hey, let the team do what they want and just write whatever junky code you feel like. There's a idea that quality is important. Agile teams shouldn't really over-anticipate what the code might do in the future. So you don't need to design some complicated plugin structure for something that doesn't need it just because sometime in the future you want to use that. Anyway, it's that. Just solve today's problems, write clean code that is adaptable, and add to it when you need to. The best code and designs come from self-organizing teams. And this is actually this is the big thing with management. So typically on a traditional software team, there's a manager, and the manager says, okay, you're going to be in charge of, writing unit tests or something, and you're going to do the user interface, and you're going to do, the file stuff, and you just sort of like, that's okay, that's my job. An Agile team really gets a whole set of features, and they decide themselves how to split up the work, like who should handle which tasks. Which, again, from a management point of view, seems just like the weirdest idea ever, right? That you're going to just let these software engineers decide what they're going to work on. And typically there's a lot of feedback on all aspects of the project, so you meet and look at code and discuss things, and so even though you're not maybe directly responsible for some part, you're still probably getting some feedback, and so on. So anyway, let's, it doesn't seem that weird, but it's a pretty radical idea from a management point of view to sort of have 10 people say, here's the features we need, go off and get it done, and you're basically trusting the team to make that happen. And then the other one is sort of this reflection idea that at regular intervals the team should, see how they're working together, what tools they have, processes they have, and somehow decide to make small changes to fine-tune things, keep things going well. There's a lot of different flavors of Agile. So Agile is sort of a descriptive word, and then there are implementations, right? So these are goals and sort of motivating factors, and then these are the ways you actually implement them through what, we're going to meet once a day, and we're going to talk about this, and we're going to do these kind of things. And these are just some of them. There's a million of them. We'll talk mostly about the top 3, with maybe a focus on Scrum, and maybe a little bit more on it. This is a little bit old, 2014. I couldn't find anything I was convinced by more recently. I think people are getting tired of asking this question. But in 2014, there were some, pure waterfall, sure, 10%. Agile was coming up third, and then some ideas that kind of percolated into waterfall from Agile, probably, not sticking to big plans and stuff like that. This probably means sort of Agile, but led by a manager much more than an Agile team, is my guess. I believe this has gone up significantly since then. I think almost every company in the Salt Lake Valley that you talk to now basically is going to claim they're doing some form of some sort of Agile stuff. Whether or not they really are or not, they're still going to claim they're mostly Agile. The idea of it has really taken over all over the place, and in fact, it's leaked into other industries now as well. You see, business schools talking about this stuff and trying to decide whether it applies to other areas of development instead of software. There's, of course, a lot of discussion about this. Agile is only for stars. Because basically, who would put a star if we get a project done without a manager looking over their shoulder and making sure they're doing it right? No, Agile assumes competence, but it's not really a star-based system. Agile doesn't fit our organizational culture. Well, don't defend your bureaucracy. Agile only works for small projects, and our projects are big. Well, big teams are not effective. Look at your problems and then recombine them at the end. There are different flavors for Agile for big, huge projects where there's teams of teams and things like that. I can't really say how great those work. Agile requires co-location, basically for all the frequent communication, and we're all over the place. Well, tech can help. Doing the video chat. It's not quite as helpful as face-to-face, but it's not that bad either. We're kind of used to those kind of technologies now. Agile lacks project management processes. Well, it's a sort of a development process, and you can add whatever management stuff you want on top of it. Our firm's individual accountability systems don't fit Agile. What do you think that means? Individual accountability. Has anyone been individually accounted for?
It could be like bonuses and stuff for individuals. Like, how are you going to do it? The entire team was given a project. You don't know who did what.
Yeah. This is this is stuff that matters, right? At a workplace, at a certain point, you get like a review, and your manager tells you you're doing well or not well, and things like promotions and bonuses are tied to those reviews. And in some ways, your achievements as part of the team get a little subsumed to the larger team. And so, one, that's hard for management, and it's hard for you as a hardworking person who really is doing your best, that you want that $5,000 a year bonus, and you don't think that, dumb Jim over there deserves a $5,000 bonus, but you're all part of the team, right? And this is a real serious issue, and one that's kind of hard to understand a little bit when you're in school and not making $5,000 bonuses or something like that, right? But at a certain point, it's not, you are selling your services to a company for money, and you reward them with productivity, and you want to maximize your side of the equation on that. You want the money. And so there are a lot of thoughts on that, but it's a hard mindset to shift. Agile is just as bad, but hey, it seems like a successful one. Let's talk about rewards for a second. There's actually some evidence that giving out these kinds of bonuses and stuff, especially to star team members, actually hurts overall performance. And there's some evidence that if you instead give people money, you give them the chance to be more independent, work on the part of the project they're interested in, chance to gain mastery over subject matter, so like training and chance to take more challenging technical roles, and give them a purpose. That these are actually much more important than giving bonuses to people for long-term successful teams. Now, I will say, when I say there's evidence of this, that's probably some very limited evidence that's interpreted in a certain way. I haven't seen anything, some super 100 studies that all say the same thing, kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to see businesses in the future focusing on these kinds of issues to reward you rather than money. I still like money. I don't know. But on the other hand, I also have a lot of these things already. So all that's left is my dream. What's that?
When the gas company takes purpose as payment, then
Yeah, when the gas company will take your autonomy. Some other issues with Agile in general is this whole idea that the customer is going to love talking to you like once a week about how the project's going, and that's probably not true necessarily. And some, that can't happen. They define this thing and they move on to other things. Team members may be unsuited to the intense involvement that characterizes Agile methods. What that is trying to say.
some people might prefer like hard structure to a more like free form.
Well, it's not really about the freeformness here. It's intense involvement. Yeah.
It could be a problem like if you're working remotely and then like they're saying that it's better to be in person and communicate.
Well, there may be some actual barriers that make this intense involvement difficult.
I think it's kind of saying that you have a bunch of nerds and you're trying to get them to talk to each other.
It's exhausting, isn't it? What was that?
I was going to say something similar. Some people are happier, they just want somebody to tell them what they're doing, then go off and learn.
Yeah, you want to spend a week going off and learning, exploring some tricky technical thing and not having to tell people every day what you're working on, kind of stuff. I'll say practice helps, but fundamentally, yeah, some people, don't gain energy from that team thing. They want to just be on their own working on stuff, and that's just a different way of doing things. Prioritizing changes can be difficult when there are multiple stakeholders, when there's client, business, developers. More traditionally, you have management who says this is how we're doing things, and they're hoping to match whatever the client in some vague sense wants in the future, and they don't care so much about what the software engineers are saying, so you have to negotiate this instead of just having a autocratic decision-making process. Keeping high-quality code and stuff is actually, it takes some effort. Feature creep. If you don't have a lockdown document saying, here's 100 things we're doing over the next 10 weeks, and instead you say, okay, here's what we're doing, how do you want to change it? It's really easy to just keep throwing stuff in there, right? Just hey, let's add this in, that seems fun. And that's a danger. A lot of times clients don't really know what they want, so they're like, yeah, let's make this an Android app or something like that, and it shouldn't be one. So how to contract this with customers is a new way of thinking, and lack of documentation, maybe complicated maintenance. Your team makes this code, maybe the project sort of goes off into sort of maintenance mode. Team members go to other projects, and then we lost a lot of information about how that worked. All right, so this Agile stuff, for the most part, is pretty vague, right? Again, it's not telling you how to achieve these things, it's telling you what's important. And so next time we'll talk about some ways of actually doing things that follow these guidelines. But it's still worth pondering, I guess, like for you, whether you like these values, if you like these priorities or not, or seeing how that might contrast with just sort of the easiness of having a document that says here's what you're doing, and you just kind of blissfully, hopefully follow along for a year and do what it says, and then you don't have to think too much in the meantime. All right, I think we better give some time for teams to work together. So work with your teams, catch up.